Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today is going to be my full review and discussion of this very impressive Reate Jack 2.0. By the way, didn't show this detail, I don't think, in my first impressions, but it does have the Reate logo there on the butt of the knife. Okay, so really interesting knife. There's actually quite a bit going on here, so let's go ahead and get into it. The first thing I've got to say is I've often pointed out, and I still would stand by the fact that Reate is the best overseas manufacturer. The things that they're doing and the level of quality to which they're working is absolutely phenomenal, and the price points that they can be had at is pretty reasonable. Now they're not cheap knives by any means, but you can find some reasonably priced stuff from Reate out there, and even when you buy brand new, you're still going to be, I believe, getting a pretty good value on your dollar spent. Okay, so this knife, coming from the very best of overseas manufacturing, is really a demonstration of what they can do. This is Reate trying to flex their muscles and really show off for us as knife enthusiasts what they're capable of. And I have to say, in that regard, this is really, really impressive. Now, this knife is not going to be for everybody, obviously not. However, it's going to be for some. Some people I think are going to absolutely love this. And probably the best description that I heard of this knife and sort of where it fits in the marketplace and how to sort of understand this knife and appreciate it is this knife is the folding knife version or equivalent of a concept car. Okay, a concept car, they have them at night at car shows. People will buy them. All right, usually they stick them in a garage somewhere and they're highly sought after collectibles, and that's about it. But you understand that with a concept car, they're really trying to show off what they can do. They're not trying, and in fact, many concept cars would not legally be allowed on the road. They're not trying to make a practical driver for you to get back and forth to work. They're trying to make something that really demonstrates that they can do some really, really impressive feats of engineering. And that's what Reate is trying to do here. And in that regard, they have done a fantastic job. And there's a lot of things about this knife that are absolutely intriguing to me and rather compelling. And I'm going to have a lot of fun, I think, sharing them with you. And I hope you'll have a lot of fun checking them out alongside me as well. So let's first of all get right into size and weight. The previous Jack, the Jack 1.0, was very large, very heavy. This is still quite large. Okay, it's 8 3/4 inches overall, a little smaller than the original Jack. 3 3/4 inches on the blade length, 5 inches on the handle. Okay, so that's the closed dimension here. All right, 4 inches of grip area, making this a very nice knife in hand, even if you have fairly large hands, or if maybe you don't have large hands, but you just prefer a larger knife handle. That's definitely where I fit in. So definitely a fairly large knife. The one thing I will point out is they really did a lot to mitigate the weight. There were a lot of complaints about the Jack 1.0 in regards to its weight. I think the light one, the carbon fiber one, was like 7 ounces, and the one with the brass was maybe 10 or 12 ounces. It was a big, big, heavy knife. And so they've really dialed that back a lot to 5 ounces. That's pretty stinking impressive. Okay, so now that we've got size and weight out of the way, I will tell you this. I have had this in my pocket a bit. I've carried it around. I've used it some. Not a lot, because frankly, this is not the knife that I'm going to take out to the bush or something like that. This is definitely a dress knife to be used in those sort of lighter use scenarios. And it has some limitations along those lines. So we'll talk about those as we work our way through here. Let's start off taking a look at the blade. As we normally do, we kind of work from tip to butt on these things. So this blade is very, very interesting. Really, really attractive hand rubbed satin finish here. I will say it's nice and thin behind the edge, which I find rather enjoyable. Sorry about the focus there for a second, guys. But I wanted to, let's see if I can get it to focus. I want to be able to kind of show off that satin finish because it is absolutely impressive. Really, really nice. I'm trying not to fingerprint it up there, and you can see I'm messing with the light, but such a gorgeous finish on that M390 steel. And then we have the back spine here, which is of course titanium, flame anodized, and you can see the screws here that are holding this on. Warncliffe blade shape. Now there are some other blade shapes coming. I just want to pull in here for a second the comb option. So you could do a comb here and just replace that blade. That's not really of great interest to me, but perhaps there's some of you out there who find that interesting. The other cool option is if you're ever shipping this knife or carrying it somewhere where you're worried about it, switch it out for the comb. No one's going to have a hard time with that. Store the blade somewhere, put it in your carry-on luggage, whatever you want to do. Just you can have that blade somewhere else and just switch it out whenever you need it. So I think that's kind of an interesting option, especially as someone living in Canada where sometimes CBSA can be a pain in the neck. Not all the time, or not too crazy, but once in a while. All right, now, when we talk about this blade, there's a couple of things I want to point out here. The main one, I guess the first thing to point out after that beautiful finish is it's nice and thin behind the edge. We've got a Warncliffe blade, very nice point there. Hold on. Boy, it's hard to show you guys the details with this phone not cooperating. There you go. So really, really nice point there. Now, I do want you to notice this line along here. And if you look at the blade, I guess you can kind of see it pretty well from this angle. There is a very distinctive little edge there. And so if you're cutting something like an apple or a potato or whatever, that's going to get in the way. And I don't know why they went that route. It's actually a little bit annoying to me. But I will say for regular EDC tests, when you're not cutting through a complete substrate, it's not that big of a deal. Of course, the other point that we are going to mention more than once in this video is that this is not meant to be the most practical knife that's ever existed, although that does seem like a fairly obvious thing to fix is that little ridge there. So the ridge, it's going to lose some points for the ridge. Would have liked to, even if it went the other way, it would have been better. However, I suspect that they needed that much material to to make sure that the screws were going to work okay. And in that case, then they should have kind of thickened everything up a little bit. But anyway, that's the route they went. It's not my choice. I would have liked to see something different done there. But otherwise, this blade is very, very cool. And I have to say, from a knife geek standpoint, I love the fact that this blade attaches to the spine. I just think it's really, really cool and interesting. And so, you know, I'm not really that concerned. And again, I carry this as a dress knife, as a high-end folder. I'm not carrying this out to the bush. I'm not going to use it for food prep or anything like that. You know, a lot of the practical points I can kind of forgive. All right. So now that we've kind of got that out of the way, let's move on to the action. And I've got to say, the action is superb on this. Now, I'm going to just show you here now, but I do have another piece of video to roll in here. So I've taken this actually apart and sort of recorded the process and let you take a look at how this thing is put together because it's really, really interesting. So these covers, they really are covers, and they lift off, and inside of here you have sort of all the components, the bearings, the washers, the bearings, the blade itself, or I mean the washers, the bearings, the inside of this blade tang itself, which is rather interesting. Because keep in mind, okay, so this blade is going to come off. All of this and what actually goes into the handle is titanium, and you don't want titanium rolling on ceramic bearings, right? They're going to wear that out pretty quickly. And so I'm going to take a second and roll in right here a quick look at the internals of this pivot so you can see how Reate has done that, because it's pretty stinking impressive. And I have to say, I really, really like what they've done. Hey guys, just really quickly want to show you the inside of the Reate Jack 2.0. Now, I haven't cleaned it up yet, but you can see it ships with some fairly heavy sort of grease on it. Here is the full, hold on, there we go. Here's the full sandwich setup, the cover, the washer, the ceramic bearing, and this is of course the pivot itself. Here's the pivot screw from the other side. Here is the frame of the knife without anything inside of it. And I have to say, I actually really like the way Reate has done it. So I'll talk about this in the review more. The other thing I wanted to show you is inside. So here is the back spine of the knife, and inside of that, there is an M390 sort of insert there that allows for the bearings to not be spinning on titanium. So I'm going to clean this up. You can see the detent path there and the ball as well. I'm going to clean this guy up and then put it all back together and get rid of all that heavier grease and replace it with KPL. So just wanted to give you guys a quick look at this whole construction setup here. Now that I'm done with that, let's go ahead. Okay, so now that you've had a chance to see that, I hope you can appreciate the ingenuity of it, and just the thought that went into how are we going to put a pivot into an integral folder and do it right. And I think they've actually done a really interesting job here. Now, I'm not in love with the 6 screws all the way around here. I feel like I do really like the idea of a pivot cover, so this can come off and everything come apart. It makes the knife very easy to service. But, there are 12 screws here to take out. I didn't take out 12 screws when I changed the bearings on my truck. Okay, so that's a lot to have to get into to take this thing apart. It's fairly straightforward, okay, and they've done a really nice job of achieving a really functional pivot and a very easily serviceable pivot. But I just wish there was a simpler way. Maybe make this one giant screw that could turn out something like that. I don't know. Anyway, so I kind of, I like this system, but I think it needs just a little bit of tweaking to avoid having to have all these screws. Now, in this particular knife, I don't think it damages it. I kind of actually like the pivot, and I've definitely, initially when I saw this, I wasn't in love with it, but it's definitely grown on me over time. The other cool thing that they've done here, since we're talking about lockup and deployment, come on, focus you. If you take a look in there, you can see the stainless steel lock bar insert. And normally, right, you put a stainless steel lock bar in from the inside, but in an Integra, you can't get in there to work. So they put it on the outside and then covered it with the carbon fiber overlay there. So that's a pretty nice way of doing that as well. Let's put this down, and I'm going to have to get this thing to focus for me again. All right, and now you can see also on the show side that there's no access to this scale. It is held on by screws. What happens is you would take the clip off, you take the screws out of here, and when you lift this cover or this overlay or this scale off, you'll see some holes going right through the frame, and then you can access the other side. All right, so I didn't include that in the takedown video. It just seemed too simple to bother with. So I figure I'll cover it now since we're kind of talking about the mechanics of this thing. Now, before I leave action and lockup and deployment, I just want to point out that they have done a really nice job of getting that detent dialed in, of getting everything extremely comfortable and satisfying. Everything on this knife just feels phenomenal. It really does. From that perspective, if you're the guy who's just looking for that perfect action, they have definitely nailed this. Okay, and I will say you'll notice in that video, in that other little bit of footage there, I did take this guy down, clean it up, and put some KPL on it, and it did improve mildly, although out of box, it's pretty stinking impressive. While we're talking about taking this knife down, I think this is an important point to make note of in the review here. They have included a bunch of extra screws. Sorry about the focus. There we go. So they've included a bunch of extra screws for various places here, as well as extra washers. I think from a review standpoint, from a longevity standpoint, that's a fantastic move, and I just love that Reate has done that. There are some other companies that do it as well, but that's truly impressive. I wish more companies would take that example and do the same thing. I would really like to see that from, like Benchmade, Spyderco, some of the regular production companies that don't really think about that. Okay, now moving on to the handle itself. Of course, the big selling point here is that this is an integral folder. They've nicely integrated a lanyard hole here, milled titanium clip, which actually works really well. I can show you here. The springiness on this is really nice, and I've carried this in a bunch of different pants, jeans, dress pants, whatever else, and it does work really well. And I've got to offer, I like a clip that works, okay? As long as it's functional, I'm happy. There are some guys who will complain almost every time they see a milled titanium clip. I'm definitely not one of those guys. I've seen clips that are bent, stamped, milled, and everything else. Some of them work well, some of them don't. And if it works well, I'm a fan. Okay, so The last thing to talk about here is ergonomics, and I will say that in hand, this is quite impressive. It feels really, really good. This is big enough, at least for me, to choke up, although, as I say, this is not a really heavy work knife for me, and so the ability to choke up is not as critical on this as it would be on something else, but it is there, and I do appreciate it. Okay, so ergonomics are great. Action, lockup, and deployment, fantastic. The blade is really, really cool and very interesting, especially the way that they've done the pivot and this whole assembly here is really, really cool. So what are my overall thoughts on the knife? I think it's pretty neat. From a gear geek perspective, it's fantastic. But I do want to bring in some other stuff just to offer some alternatives. Okay, so here's another knife that action is about as good. It's not quite as attractive. It's not as visually interesting. There's not as much going on. You can pick these up also on the secondary market for a pretty good price. This is my favorite Reate, still, even having owned this. WE knives, of course, are not quite on the level of Reate, but boy, they are so close. Okay, and so, if you want something really high end that's really satisfying, I think, there's some good options from WE as well, not the least of which is the 037, which has some really innovative features that are, okay, I better back up a bit. There's a reason I brought this knife in. This has a bunch of cool features, some very innovative stuff going on here. Just like here, the difference is all the innovation is driven directly toward practicality here, which is pretty cool. Okay, of course, when it comes to high-end titanium frame locks, it's worth taking a look at an XM18. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but I do want to bring in a couple of other sort of more budget-friendly pieces and some stuff that you're probably pretty familiar with. So there is the Para 2. I've got a Rat Model 1 here as well. All right, and let me grab, let's throw the 8010 in here. Just, it's always worth throwing in. And then I've got one other knife that I want to spend a little bit of time on because it's equally special, I think. This is the other integral, and I actually had a little contest about this. I said I had two integrals on the way, and Trevor Wilson was the one, Wilsonston, I think. Anyway, Trevor, he guessed these two knives, and I have to say, both of these are fantastic, fantastic knives. I love the fact that they're both integral. Very, very cool, very impressive stuff. And so, and this one is quite a bit cheaper as well, and a much more minimalist design. All right, so overall thoughts on the Reate Jack 2. Well, I've got to say, this is a beautiful, beautiful knife. Just look at it. It's a piece of functional artwork. It really is. Now, it probably leans toward the artwork side a little more than to the function side, but that's okay. I think it's important, in fact, that in the knife world we have this kind of stuff because it's great to sort of push the envelope and figure out what can be done and how it can be done. And I think Reate has done a great job with offering some really cool stuff here. The action is fantastic. The look is fantastic. If this is up your alley, and I get that this is not up everyone's alley, but if you're a knife enthusiast, if you're a collector like I am, I think you can probably get a lot of joy out of this guy. So that's where I would leave it. Can I recommend this broadly? No, because this is, we know going in, this is not a knife for everybody. But if this is the knife for you, and if you really get off on the engineering and on the ingenuity and the cool stuff here and the different design, then yeah, this could be really, really something you'd enjoy. And it's offered at a pretty reasonable price point considering what higher end stuff goes for these days. All right, thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Definitely go over to White Mountain Knives and pick one of these up. You can save yourself 10%, which is really, really good savings on these. I think they go for $450 or $475 or something like that. So, that's 10% is a significant amount of money. All right, thanks again for watching. Again, use those links, like, subscribe, and comment down below. We will talk to you soon.